Hi everyone. This is the third and final lecture of this week, and as I promised, we're going to be looking at the royal tombs of Ur. The royal tombs is such a unique example of an assemblage of burial goods that are excavated in the city of Ur, and it gives us a fascinating window into the life and the craftsmanship and technologies of making in these southern Mesopotamian cities in the middle of the third millennium BCE. In the previous lecture, I presented some evidence to you about that emergence of that new urban elite in the early dynastic cities. And discussed some examples of how the urban culture of architecture and art production was characterized. In this lecture, I'm just going to focus on an even more striking set of objects, artifacts with you, all excavated from a royal cemetery known today as the Royal Cemetery of Ur. And this material was actually exhibited around the world a number of times as a very coherent body of artifacts that we will study. These artifacts, the study of these prestige artifacts from the Royal Cemetery and their really rich pictorial imagery, as well as their technologies and materials of production, offers us an excellent window into first the notions of death and afterlife in ancient Mesopotamia, while revealing a great deal of information about the arts and craftsmanship at the time and the long-distance trade of exotic materials and technologies of production as part of an ideology of the urban elites that relate to that material wealth. They also tell us a great deal about pictorial narrative in ancient Western Asian art, as we will see in some of the examples in a little bit. One of the most prominent cities of the late 3rd millennium BC in Mesopotamia was the city of Ur, middle to late millennium. 3rd millennium, and we will see more about that, the modern site of Tel al-Muqayyir in southern Iraq. All the way, not far from Uruk, all the way close to the Persian Gulf. And this city was the home of an important sanctuary complex dedicated to the moon god Nana, and became very famous with the first monumental ziggurat that you see in this photograph, a tower temple built by the kings of the 3rd dynasty of Ur, particularly Ur-Nama, in the 3rd millennium BC. But that's going to come in the next few weeks. We're going to study it later. But located in the southern tip of the alluvial plain on the river, this city acted as a major port of trade, especially with the Persian Gulf. And you see the harbor over there, so you want to really imagine this almost like a city on the water as a port of trade where, ships are coming in, trading ships are coming in from the Persian Gulf. The royal tombs were excavated by the British archaeologist Leonard Woolley during his excavations at Ur, and I'm going to showing you on the top left the site of the excavations, the royal tombs below that building there in the model. So this is Leonard Woolley, that was excavated between 1922 and 1934. He was one of the leading archaeologists in Iraq at the time, working on the behalf of the British Museum and the University of Pennsylvania Museum of Archaeology and Anthropology. While digging at the southwestern corner of the moon god, god Nana's temple, Woolley came across a massive and very deep burial ground that predated the Nana temple complex. And so this is a kind of a very exciting telegram that he sent when he found one of the sort of royal tombs, the Queen Puabi's tomb. And then this is the pit, actually, this is the end of the excavations, the kind of pit that was created, the final depth of the pit 10, excavated during the last season of Ur. And so you can sort of see the scale of excavations in this, the scale and depth of excavations at this site, removing 13,000 cubic meters of soil, and so and you can see him at the very bottom with his wife Catherine. And so Woolley excavated a total of, in that enormous pit, Woolley excavated a total of 6,000 burials in the area, and he was able to record about 2,000 of them. There were just so many, he didn't even record a great many of them. Woolley managed to do a relative dating of the burials based on the cylinder seals that he was finding. So a lot of the dating actually took place in accordance with the stylistic dating of the cylinder seals that were found with the dead bodies. In this extraordinary cemetery, he identified 16 royal tombs based on their monumentality. You can see them in this plan in the form of stone building plans within this burial ground. And a wealth of burial goods were discovered, recovered with the deceased, and in some cases the ritual burial of a retinue of individuals buried along with the elite individual. As I show you from PG 789 that he excavated, in which 75 individuals were buried alongside with the elite deceased member, and it's believed by archaeologists that they were in fact killed during the burial ceremony. And many scholars understand this as some form of human sacrifice, where up to 75 individuals were buried at once. They had ritual garments on them, holding ritual paraphernalia, musical instruments, and ceremonial objects. And I'm showing you an artist's rendering of this funerary ceremony. Each of the deceased participants held a mysterious small cup from which they are believed to have consumed a small amount of poison at the height of the ceremony. And actually, some of the archaeological evidence, some of the bone evidence, actually has shown that some of these individuals were hit on the head during the ceremony. Unfortunately, Woolley did not keep the skeletons, so there's no way to study this today. So many of the prestige objects that I will discuss today in this lecture come precisely from such ceremonial context of the 16 royal tomb burials. For example, this extraordinary musical instrument known as the Great Lyre, found within a tomb of a male, tomb 789 I was showing you. Lyres were musical instruments for the funeral ceremonies at Ur, because the royal tombs contained several of them. The wooden core of the lyre's 11-stringed sound box has disintegrated, but the delicately inlaid and constructed front that you see on the left was preserved, and it was found adjacent to the bodies of elaborately dressed women who took part in the burial ceremony. The front of the lyre is an inlaid base and is topped with a bearded bull's head sheathed in gold. And so this is a kind of a really typical representation as part of these musical instrument designs. These scenes depict, as you can see in the middle, they depict animals engaged in activities normally associated with human beings, such as butchering meat, carrying and pouring liquid from vessels, and playing musical instruments. In the top scene, a naked hero uses his arms to control two human-headed bulls who stare at the viewer. And taken together, the scenes seem to present either funerary rites or afterlife in the underworld, but the animals taking on human roles, and that's something that later Mesopotamian texts talk about as an aspect of afterlife. So, here's another example of such a lyre, a silver one this time, that has inlays of red limestone and lapis lazuli, dating to 2600 BCE, early dynastic III period. And you see here in the photograph the moment of discovery where Leonard Woolley is holding the lyre. And this is an artifact that is currently in the British Museum. Some of the burial gifts at the Royal Cemetery include composite objects, which are really fascinating. They're exquisitely made from gold and inlaid with precious stones, such as this vessel in the form of an ostrich egg on the right, and a gold dagger on the left. The use of this kind of soft metal, gold is a very soft metal, in making such an object like a dagger brings questions of function for these objects, and they seem to have been meant to be produced just for the burial ceremony, and not for to be used in real life, actually. So ostrich eggs were a delicacy in southern Mesopotamia at the time. And so archaeologists believe that that's actually making a reference to that kind of really difficult to achieve, prestige elite food item. Same applies to this really fascinating composite artifact, the statuette of a goat perched on against a tree or a bush. The goat's fleece and legs are sheathed with gold. This is really another really incredible artifact, and his ears are made of copper alloy. And another sort of precious item is sort of lapis lazuli is generously used, as you can see in his body. Horns, eyes, shoulder, fleece. White shell is used for his body as well, all raised on a kind of an inlaid pedestal with shell and limestone. Similar representations of goats exist, are attested in other media, such as that cylinder seal impression I'm showing you on the right. You can see the representation of similar kind of an item in the middle of this representation. The statue is actually is one of a pair, and that may have served as a base as a low table. And one of them is in the University of Pennsylvania, and the other one is in the British Museum. And that one depicts a male goat standing against an imaginary plant shrub with rosettes. And so this anthropomorphized body of the goat is made of precious gold, silver, and lapis lazuli, and also sort of stands on this kind of checkered mosaic of red limestone and lapis lazuli. So finally, I would like to turn to the standard of Ur, which is one of the sort of really fascinating, one of the most remarkable objects. And so I'm going to close this video with this object. The Royal Standard of Ur was excavated from PG 779 at Ur. And it dates to 2400 BCE, 2550 to 2400 BCE. The dating is not all that accurate. And it's a trapezoidal box decorated on all four sides with inlaid mosaic scenes made from shell, red limestone, and lapis lazuli that was set in bitumen. The blue-colored lapis lazuli was one of the most widely used precious stones in early Mesopotamian prestige objects, and is known to have been mined in the Badakhshan mountains of Afghanistan. Woolley preferred to call this enigmatic object the standard. This is the name that Woolley gave to the object, and he assumed that it would have been raised on a pole and sort of really used in some kind of a funerary or ritual procession. It's very common for archaeologists, when they are not sure about the function of an object, they tend to call them standards or ritual objects, and so on. But this remains as a kind of a really hypothesis. The two faces of the Standard of Ur depict two different episodes in a narrative divided in three horizontal registers, with a culminating scene on the top register. One of the faces presents us a scene from a battle and capturing of prisoners of war. Here is the prisoners of war who are being presented to a ruler-like individual at the center of the top register. An individual who is depicted slightly larger than others. In the bottom register, we see a series of chariots drawn by four onagers trampling over nude bodies of defeated enemies. The spatial and temporal progression continues in the middle register with a phalanx of armed soldiers coming into direct contact with, again, enemies depicted in the nude and taking them as prisoners of war. And on top, the ruler is backed by a number of courtiers holding special instruments, followed by another chariot, perhaps reserved for the ruler himself. The other face of the standard has a similar layout of three registers of representation, horizontal registers, connected to each other by virtue of moving individuals from one register to another. But the subject matter is quite different here and involves a celebration in the form of a banquet scene. And banquet scenes, we saw them on the wall plaques from Tel Asmar and Kafage, remember, and that were dedicated to the temple. So this is an iconography, this is a topic, visual topic, that they share with those stone votive plaques from temples. This narrative also dominated by an individual who is depicted slightly larger than the others, and he's seated holding a cup, wearing his ceremonial flounced skirt, and well known from representations of the elite in early Mesopotamian art. You will remember that Eannatum in the Stele of Vultures, in the Stele of Eannatum from Lagash, was also wearing exactly the same flounced skirt while he was attacking the enemy. So he is facing here with other banqueteers who are entertained by what appeared to be a lyre player on the far right. And the lower two registers illustrate processions of people bringing animals and goods, various kinds of goods, as a tribute to the king, to the ruler himself. So the Royal Standard of Ur presents us a very intriguing example of an artifact rich in its pictorial program of representation of historical events and its materials and its technologies of production. It tells us a great deal about death and afterlife in ancient Mesopotamia, the ideology of the material wealth in the funerary contexts, about exotic materials and technologies of production, and therefore the significance of long-distance trade with exotic places and landscapes, and gives us an early example of an ideologically charged pictorial narrative where political conflict, war, and feasting are brought together, linked together in some kind of a cause-effect relationship. This linking of feasting on the one side and war on the other side are clearly linked to each other, and we saw a very similar kind of linking right in the Stelio vultures as well, the battle as well. And so so this concludes my my lectures for this week, and I really look forward to our discussion on Thursday. Thank you for listening.